Hi, I'm Shalane from TSC Tuition, and today I'll be analysing the responses from United Airlines to that recent altercation between a passenger and its airline crew. So I'm looking at the memo to the company that was sent on April 10th, which I'm looking at a copy of here. So this is obviously a missive sent to the company regarding this situation. And if we just have a look at the whole letter, I suppose, memo letter, I would say if we had to find a contention, it's fairly odd in this particular piece, but I would say the contention is actually in that middle paragraph at the end, where he says, "While I deeply regret this situation arose, I also emphatically stand behind all of you, and I want to commend you for continuing to go above and beyond to ensure we fly right." Now, it is odd that a persuasive article of any sort doesn't start or end with the contention. So, looking at that last bit, treating our customers and each other with respect and dignity is at the core of who we are, and we must always remember this no matter how challenging the situation. That doesn't quite fit in with the overall message, I guess, of this letter, because this letter is a response from, head honcho down to all the minions, I suppose, of the company, and it's the company's official response to this incident or this altercation, and I think having that last bit about and with respect and dignity, this is who we are, etc., etc., it really is a bit of corporate talk, really a bit of corporate speech that sort of makes this letter sound a bit more official and a bit more polished. Whereas if we think about what the main message or the main purpose really of this letter is to address what has happened, it's to give an official, recap of what's gone on. And the message is that the CEO, Oscar Munoz, thinks that his company did the right thing, and which is why I would pinpoint the end of that second paragraph as the contention rather than what we see at the end, which is more of a rewording of the slogan or company policy, something like that. So let's have a look at this in a little bit more detail. Looking at that first paragraph, in that second sentence, while the facts and circumstances are still evolving, that turn of phrase, still evolving, makes it sound like the facts are not clear yet, which works in favour of the company, because it's all about let's not rush to judgment, let's not make assumptions, let's wait and hear really from the company what's really happened. When I think the truth is, if you've got viral videos going online that shows what's happened, I would say everything's evolved already, everything's quite settled. But that phrase, they're still evolving, makes this situation sounds very murky and unclear. And then if we then continue on with that sentence, especially with respect to why this customer defied Chicago aviation security officers the way he did, the word defy is very laden with meaning. Usually we don't defy things and sound, quite positive out of it. Defiance, or defying, in this case defied, is quite negative in its connotations and, the ideas that we associate with that word. And so when it says why this customer defied blah, 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 security officers, it clearly pits him as a rebel. It pits him as someone who doesn't obey rules, who's got no regard for authority, who's a troublemaker, etc., etc. And then it goes on to give you a clearer picture of what transpired. Again, it adds to that sense of murkiness about the situation. It makes it sound like, the facts aren't all in yet. It's very unsure about, who said what and did what. So that all works for this argument that, people shouldn't rush to judgment. So then we look at that second paragraph. As you will read, this situation, again, situation is a bit of a neutral word. Lots of things can be situations, like, if I go to the shops and there's no car park to be found, that's a situation. In this case, a man getting bashed on a flight could also be a situation. So the word situation encompasses a very wide range of events. And I think in this case, situation is used deliberately to try and tone down the seriousness or the severity of this issue. And we get further evidence of this as we look further on in that sentence. So as you will read, the situation was unfortunately compounded. So again, compounded is a very detached sort of word. Compounded is, I think it sounds a little bit scientific-y. It sounds very detached. It's not a very emotional word. A more emotional, or perhaps a more manipulative word in that sense, I think might be escalated. Was unfortunately escalated, would make it sound a lot more serious, whereas was unfortunately compounded, what does that mean? And then we keep going. When one of the passengers, we politely asked to deplane. So again, there's a lot of sort of this neutralizing sort of language. We politely, it's very, it's very civil. It's it all sounds very pleasant. Makes the company or the staff who were working on that flight sounds very nice, pleasant. Asked to deplane. This might be a bit of jargon that's quite acceptable in the aviation industry, but, as a normal commoner, reading this to deplane is, again, it's a very detaching sort of vocabulary. It creates that distance between what really happened, which is someone was basically dragged out of the plane, physically dragged out of the plane, to deplane. I mean, I guess that makes sense, and I'm not saying that it's an unsuitable word to use in this situation, but what it does, it sort of just tones it down. It sort of whitewashes what's the emotion in this situation. Was refused, and it became necessary to contact Chicago aviation security officers to help. And again, became necessary is very neutral, creates that sense of distance from the emotions of what's happened to the official response from the company. And then we keep going. Our employees followed established procedures. So now we go into a very sort of authoritative sort of language where established procedures, it's, it makes it sound like there were systems in place, that these people knew what to do, that this has happened before, and, therefore this is all very official. It sort of carries that tone of authority, or at least of an established systemic procedure, way of doing things. For dealing with situations like this, while I deeply regret this situation arose, again, situation is very neutral sort of language. A stronger word might be altercation, which is a fight. But, for obvious reasons, Mr. Munoz doesn't use altercation. To use situation would be, again, to take that emotion out of it. I also emphatically stand behind all of you. Now, here is where I previously said I think the contention is, and also one of the reasons why I think it sort of shows itself as a contention is that this is the first very emotive or emotionally strong sort of word that we get out of this whole letter. I also emphatically stand behind all of you. To emphatically stand behind something is to, stubbornly, enthusiastically, no holds barred, sort of support. That's what we're doing here, to insist, to not take no for an answer. And we don't hear this sort of language anywhere else in this letter. So it makes sense that if you were going to use language like this, you'd use it in the contention. Okay, so let's move on to the Twitter response. I think this was pretty much on the same day. And again, I'll try and put up a link to this in the description box. So let's have a look. So the Twitter response says, "This is an upsetting event to all of us here at United." Upsetting is one way to put it. I mean, I could be upset that, the cereal that I wanted was not on sale at the supermarket. That's a bit upsetting. But to witness a man, forcibly dragged out of a plane by, a group of thugs, is a bit more than upsetting. I would say, perhaps traumatizing might be a more appropriate word. But again, upsetting is, it tones down, it takes that emotion out of it, it bleaches it. If you're doing English language, this is very similar to how semantic bleaching works, except, this time it's intentional. I apologize for having to re-accommodate these customers. So notice how it's not addressing that particular man who, is at the center of what's happened, but it's addressed to everybody else on the plane. So it's not an apology then. And also to re-accommodate these customers, make them sound, very reasonable, they're very pleasant to deal with, very civil. And then it goes, "Our team is moving with a sense of urgency to work with the authorities." Now, I find that phrase, "a sense of urgency," a bit dubious. Like, why not just, "Our team is moving with urgency"? So if they're moving with a sense of urgency, does that mean they're not actually doing anything urgently or with any kind of speed? It's just that they make it seem like they are doing things urgently? I'm not sure. I think that particular phrase is not very well thought through. Yada, yada, yada. And then if we look at the last sentence, "We are also reaching out to this passenger to talk directly to him and further address and resolve this situation." Again, situation, we've talked about that before. Resolve this situation makes it sound like it assigns responsibility to both parties. You resolve a problem when two parties don't agree, right? You resolve a conflict like that. But what it also suggests is that both parties have an equal share of the blame, or that both parties have an equal share of power in which they bring to this conflict. So a really good way to highlight this assigning of responsibility is to think about, would you ever say, that the Nazis, that you could resolve the situation between the Nazis and the Jews during World War II? Not really, because the Jews had no responsibility in what happened in World War II. They were victims in that situation. And so you can't really resolve that sort of situation there. So what's going on here in this Twitter response is that assigning of blame and trying to, paint the company in a light that is not, that the company is like a bully or a thug, and things like that. Now, this becomes really interesting when we look at that last statement from United Airlines, which is, I think, published a day later, April 11th. So let's have a look. "Dear team, this truly horrific event that occurred on this flight has elicited many responses from all of us." So straight from the get-go, we get truly horrific event, which is much stronger in terms of the imagery and the emotional response that it's supposed to elicit. And we don't see anything like this in that original first team memo. And then it lists, right, outrage, anger, disappointment, to, sort of cover the whole spectrum of the appropriate response to this incident. Now, I would imagine they do this to in response to the criticism that the company has received about, not being sympathetic enough, of having handled this incident pretty terribly, of being, tone deaf. And so this memo that we get elicited many responses from all of us: outrage, anger, disappointment, is to directly address those criticisms, right? No, we do actually feel these things that you accuse us of not feeling. And then I share all of these sentiments, and one above all, my deepest apologies for what happened. So the CEO is taking responsibility here, obviously, and it's the first time, really, that the CEO has taken any sort of responsibility when we compare it with the Twitter response or that first memo. We don't see, I think this is the first instance, really, of of personal responsibility that we see in the memos. Like you, I continue to be disturbed by what happens on this flight. But we still see some of this detaching, sort of neutralizing sort of language. I continue to be disturbed. Disturbed is, I watch a horror movie and I could be a bit disturbed by, what I've seen. Like, I could watch, say, Human Centipede, and that's a bit disturbing. But that's a movie, right? That's not watching someone being manhandled and accosted down the plane. So again, I think that there's still a bit of that toning down language that's going on here. By what happened on this flight, again, it's a distancing technique, right? What happened on this flight, by not naming or labeling or, saying explicitly what happened, it sort of just pushes that incident further away from the author. And I deeply apologize to the customer forcibly removed. So now we're sort of, getting a bit more of that sort of clearer language about what's going on. But again, it's still not very specific. Forcibly removed is, doesn't convey the horror of what's happened. You could forcibly remove a child from a car seat who doesn't want to get out of the car, but that's not quite the same as, what we see in the video. And to all the customers aboard, no one should ever be mistreated this way. Mistreated, again, I think is a bit of a toning down sort of word. A stronger word would be abused. But obviously, the word's not used here in order to distance the CEO from this event, right? It creates, again, that sense of distance. And then if we look at that last paragraph, never too late to do the right thing. I've committed to our customers and our employees that we are going to fix what's broken so this never happens again. So fix what's broken is, again, very general. You fix lots of things that's broken. You can fix a car, you can fix a kettle, you could fix whatever's gone on at that on that day on the plane. And again, it's the same same thing that's going on in that earlier paragraph, disturbed by what happened on this flight, right? By not specifically saying exactly what happened, right? You get to remove yourself and to detach yourself from the event. This includes a thorough review of crew movement, our policies for incentivizing volunteers. Now, again, maybe that is jargon that's used in the airline industry, but I think for a normal person reading that, incentivizing volunteers is a bit of a euphemism, no? Incentivizing, I think what they mean by that is, giving a monetary reimbursement for booting people off a flight. A stronger sort of word would be bribing. And volunteers is, I think an incident like this really sort of raises the question of what is a volunteer in this sense. And then how we handle oversold situations, and an examination of how we partner with airport authorities and local law enforcement. Now, partnering, in this sense, is an interesting word. A partner suggests a person of equal responsibility, of equal power. Your partners, right? That's why your spouse is a partner in life. You are equals in that relationship. And so the word here of how we partner with airport authorities and local law enforcement suggests that they are equal in authority and power to airport authorities and local law enforcement. And I think in this message, thinking about the audience, which is the rest of the company, really, it sort of really suggests that the company is on par, equal with law enforcement in regards to how they want to do things and how they want to, set policies and enact those policies. And then that last sentence, I promise you, we will do better, is again, I think, a shifting of that blame. It signals a shifting of the blame. Because it would sound so much different if he said, I promise you, I will do better. It's not really a full apology, because up the top, when he says, my deepest apologies for what happened, right? So here he's sort of claiming responsibility. I'm responsible. I made a mistake. I'm very sorry. And then to end with, I promise you, we will do better, instead of, I promise you, I will do better, suggests that, this apology is not totally sincere, and that he doesn't really mean what he says. So I hope that was interesting. If you'd like to get some tutoring, English tutoring, 1-to-1, I'm in non-awarding. You can message me on Facebook or on YouTube. Or if you'd like someone to come to where you are, we could also do that. Again, just leave a message. Like and subscribe to the YouTube and Facebook pages, and thanks for watching.